Hi everyone and good morning. Today we are going to finish off topic 11.4, coordination and response. And before we do that, let's do a recap of our previous lesson. So we are still covering 11.4 hormones, but previously our step to success was this. Firstly, to state the definition of hormones. Secondly, to state two examples of hormones. And thirdly, to explain their roles. So when we state the definition of hormones, we have to mention all of these points. So firstly, a hormone is a chemical substance produced by a gland carried via the blood which alters the activity of one or more specific target organs, and it is then destroyed by the liver. When we state the two examples of hormones, don't forget to also mention where it is made, which is the gland, and also their target organs. So the adrenal glands, they make the hormone adrenaline, and the target organs are the liver, heart, and voluntary muscles. Islets of Langerhans are the glands that make insulin, and the target organs are the liver and muscles. Now let's talk about the roles of adrenaline. Remember that adrenaline is released during an emergency situation, and it is the fight or flight hormone. So what adrenaline does to the target organ, the liver, is that it will tell the liver, or it will encourage the liver, influence the liver, affect the liver to turn glycogen into glucose, and the reason for this is to boost the blood sugar levels during emergencies, and it will also make sure that the heart beats much more faster, and this ensures more oxygen to be sent to the brain and muscles. And when you look over here, we have glucose, more oxygen to the brain and muscles, and that is just an idea, or the main reason is, or the idea we're looking at is more respiration and more energy, so that you can either fight or fly away or run away from danger. Another effect of adrenaline is to the target organ, voluntary muscles, and they also make sure that the voluntary muscles will tire less easily, and this, for the main reason, is because there's more energy being directed to the voluntary muscles as well, because we're sending a lot of oxygen and also glucose to the voluntary muscles. Okay, now let's explain the role of insulin, and there are two target organs for insulin, which is the liver and the voluntary muscles. So the insulin would promote the uptake of glucose both in the liver and voluntary muscle, and also would convert or promote the conversion of glucose into glycogen for storage. So insulin is the opposite of adrenaline in a way that it encourages the storage of glucose. However, insulin wants you to break down the glucose for energy instead. Adrenaline does that instead. Okay, so although we have covered this learning objective, which is to state the role of insulin in controlling blood glucose concentration in our previous lesson, I do want to stress on some important information. So we're still going to cover this learning objective, but in a more detailed manner today. So controlling the level of blood glucose. We know that insulin is a hormone that is in charge of controlling the level of blood glucose. Insulin is the hormone that is, when it's released by the islets of Langerhans, it would reduce the blood glucose, which is the level of sugar in the blood. Islets of Langerhans can be found in the pancreas. So this is just my drawing of the pancreas, and this right here is the blood vessels surrounding the tissues right here. So the body tissues here refer to the target organ, so you could think of this as the liver or the muscle cells. And right here, so you have your blood capillaries here, and surrounding the body tissues is always it's not the plasma, but the what is this called again? Body tissue? Tissue fluid. I'm so sorry, I forgot about that. This is tissue fluid. Plasma is inside the blood capillary. Okay, right here on your right hand side, I have drawn, you guys, not really drawn, but I made this through PowerPoint, a graph. So on the y-axis is the blood glucose. So as this increases, it means that blood glucose increases, and right here on the x-axis I have insulin right here. So going to the right means increasing insulin concentration. Okay, now that we have this slide right here explained, let's talk about what insulin does and actually visualize it. So the pancreas, when blood glucose level is high, what the pancreas does is that it would make insulin. So the pancreas, when we're talking about pancreas, we're talking about the islets of Langerhans that is found in the pancreas. And so I have labeled here like a diamond shape, and the shape has an eye, and that refers to insulin. And glucose, you know that the shape is kind of like this. I think that's called a hexagon, and I colored it pink. And inside your blood, actually, especially after having a meal, rich in carbohydrate, you're going to have a lot of glucose in your blood. And when this happens, you want to decrease the amount of level of sugar in the blood, or we call that blood glucose level. And how we do that to get it back to normal is that the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas would make insulin, and that insulin will be then carried via the blood, and then it would diffuse into the tissue fluid, and then it will then meet the cells. And the thing is that all of these hormones, if you guys remember from a video that we watched before this, is that on the cell membrane of target cells is that they have cell receptors, and those receptors are the ones that are going to bind with these hormones, and then a change in the activity of the cell will then begin. So once the insulin has been released into the bloodstream, and then they will get in contact with the receptors on the target organs, what's going to happen here is that the target organ, which is either the liver or the muscles, they are going to take up more glucose from the blood. So uptake of glucose from the blood will increase. And now we have a decrease in glucose that is available in the bloodstream. And not just that, but remember there's a second function of insulin is that it also promotes the conversion of these glucose into glycogen. So what's going to happen is that because there is now less blood glucose level in the blood, so the graph would go down. So as insulin increases in the blood glucose would also decrease. And don't forget, the last part is that once you have a lot of glucose in the liver or in the muscle cells, they're going to store that glucose. And as animal cells do, they store their carbohydrate in the form of glycogen. So let's do a bit of a recap that plants store their carbohydrate in the form of starch, and animal cells store in the form of glycogen. So this big molecule right here represents glycogen. It does take hundreds and thousands of glucose molecules to make a glycogen molecule, but I just kind of put in like I think 4 or 3 in here just to simplify the diagram. And I didn't want to draw hundreds and hundreds, so I hope you guys got that. Okay, but there is another case. This is a case so just now we were talking about after you're eating carbohydrates, right? What if you are not eating carbohydrates? What if you are fasting? So when you're fasting, for example, if this will cause the level of blood glucose, the sugar in the blood, to fall. So in the case of fasting, the islets of Langerhans would instead release a hormone called glucagon. So just now it was insulin if there is high blood glucose level, and that is after eating. But what if you're fasting? That means that you don't have enough glucose in your blood. So the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas would make these hormones called glucagon. They're not glycogen, but glucagon. So glucagon, I am going to represent it in this oval grain shape right here. Okay, and now I also gave you guys a little graph right here, and here we have glycogen instead of insulin, so please take note of that. Okay, so let's get back to our picture right here. So we have here little bits of glucose molecules, only a small amount to represent the fact that we have a fall in blood glucose. So once the pancreas makes glucagon, it's going to release it into the bloodstream, and then that's going to reach the target organs, which is the liver and the muscle cells as well. So once these glucagon molecules have interacted with the cell receptor, it's going to change the activity of these cells right here to encourage them to convert the glycogen back to glucose. And also this glucose will then diffuse out into the bloodstream later. So what glucagon does is that glucagon will convert glycogen, which is the stored carbohydrate, into the smaller and simpler molecule, which is glucose. So this glucose will then diffuse into the bloodstream. Hence, you can see now that you have an increasing or more glucose in the blood. So the graph would go like this. So you start with a fall of glucose, and as glycogen increases, then also blood glucose will then increase. So we have this increasing and decreasing of blood glucose level, and this has something to do with actually homeostasis. Regulating levels of blood glucose within narrow limits is an example of homeostasis. Remember that homeostasis is controlling the internal environment. And the environment we're talking about here is the blood glucose level. So the pancreas is also involved in homeostasis. And what it does is that it can release glucagon to convert glycogen into glucose. And when this happens, it is to increase the blood glucose once the blood glucose level falls. The pancreas, aka the islets of Langerhans found in the pancreas, can also convert or promote the conversion of glucose back to glycogen for storage when they release insulin into the bloodstream, and this usually happens to decrease blood glucose level. So this is what we mean by so I know that the learning objective mentioned about insulin only, but this I wanted to relate it to homeostasis, so I included glucagon in this topic as well. Okay, so now we learned about how we can control the blood glucose level. To decrease it, after eating a lot of carbohydrates, we can release insulin. And if we are fasting and we want more blood glucose in our blood, then we can make and release glucagon. However, there are some problems that may arise, and this can either arise because of genetics or lifestyle choices that are not very healthy. And I'm sure you've heard of this before, diabetes mellitus, or just diabetes. So it has something to do with sugar intake and also insulin problems. So we're going to introduce the new step to success today. Firstly, we're going to describe the signs of diabetes, and secondly, to describe the treatment of diabetes mellitus. And the learning objective that it is related to is to describe the signs, which is the increased blood glucose concentration and glucose in urine, and treatment, which is the administration of insulin of diabetes mellitus. So, what is diabetes? In Malay, we say kencing manis, right? And there is actually a scientific reason for saying this. It's not that you taste it and it tastes sweet, but something in your urine is the one that is sweet. And you know, when we're talking about something sweet, we're talking about carbohydrates. And simple sugars are the ones that are sweet. Okay, so what is diabetes? Diabetes is a condition in which blood glucose levels remain too high. That means that it doesn't just, so once your blood glucose level increases, it remains very, very high, and you don't want that. You want it to go back to the normal level. And in the case of diabetes, the person's islet cells, so islets of Langerhans, produce insufficient insulin. This means that they don't have enough insulin to bring the glucose level down. So what are the signs of diabetes? A person that has diabetes, they will have these symptoms. Glucose is found in their urine. They also have high glucose level in their blood. Because glucose is found in their urine, that means that a lot of water will move into the urine and form urine due to osmotic pressure. And therefore, these people will feel very, very thirsty and very, very tired. The thirst comes from losing a lot of water. And being tired is related to actually losing glucose because they don't take in glucose. They actually have too much glucose that is in the blood, so it is filtered out by the kidney. So just to recall the reason why they become thirsty and why water is mainly found in the urine instead when someone has diabetes. If you guys recall about osmosis, which is the movement of water molecules from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. So in this case, so let me try to have a draw pen. Okay, where is my pen? So in this case, because the urine itself, okay, right here. Oh no, my pen is not working. Hold on. Alright, I'll be right back. I'm going to connect it first because my Bluetooth is not connecting. Okay, I'm sorry, you'll have to wait because I don't want to edit this video because it's going to take a long time to process when I edit it, so I'm just going to fill in with some narration now okay, nice. So now I am connected. Okay, so in this case, so if your urine contains a lot of glucose molecule, then this means that the concentration or the water potential, so water potential would decrease because there is a lot of glucose molecule. So what happens is that in the kidney, during the selective reabsorption, what happens is that water molecules, because there is lower water potential in your urine compared to water potential in the blood. So remember, during osmosis, water moves from higher water potential to lower water potential. So this is why a lot of water escapes your blood and forms urine instead when someone has diabetes. So this person will not just lose glucose, but they will also lose a lot of water, causing them to feel very thirsty and tired. Okay, and because this person, if they have diabetes, they make more urine, due to increase in water inside their urine, they're going to go to the toilet or urinate much more frequently as well. So these are the three main signs of diabetes. How do we treat diabetes? If insulin production is not seriously reduced, it may be possible to treat by restricting intake of carbohydrate. And that means they need to have a diet with a reduced carbohydrate in their diet. So this is just a cute GIF that I found on the internet. And diabetes refers to a condition. So let's have a look here. Laser pointer. So diabetes refers to a condition in which the blood glucose level is too high. That is correct. And insulin helps to decrease the blood glucose level through cellular uptake. There are two types. So the first type of diabetes, so let's focus on this area here. The first type is the pancreatic cells do not secrete insulin and not enough. And type 2 is that the cells do not respond to insulin much. So we're going to focus on type 1, which is not secreting enough insulin. And one of the ways to treat this is insulin therapy. So there's a very, very quick GIF there, but no worries, I have it on the slide. So how to treat diabetes? So in the more extreme cases, regular injections of insulin is important. So that is what we mean by insulin therapy. But if somebody is going through insulin therapy, that means you have to pair it up with a diet as well. So carbohydrate intake must also be regulated, hence the person has to go on a diet with less carbohydrates. And now we're done with coordination and response. So let's just do a recap of our steps to success. Firstly, describe the signs of diabetes mellitus, and secondly, to describe the treatment of diabetes as well. So to describe the signs of diabetes, so we talked about that. Glucose is found in their urine, which is another one is obviously the part where glucose is high glucose in their blood or high blood glucose level. Second, increased thirst and tiredness. And thirdly, urinating frequently. And it's not to describe signs of diabetes mellitus, I'm sorry. The second S2S is to describe the treatment of diabetes instead. So the treatment is to restrict intake of carbohydrate and taking insulin therapy or insulin injection. So that is the end of our lesson for today. If you guys realize, I have provided you with some past year paper questions. So I hope that you guys can try that out for about maybe 10 to 15 minutes. So please pause this video first, and then let me just silent my phone. Okay, so please pause this video and try out these questions on your own. You can look at your notes if you want to. I don't mind that. And once you're ready, you can click continue, and we're going to answer the questions together. Discard. Okay, so let's go and answer the questions together now. I'm going to okie dokie. Alright, so this is the first question, which is to explain what is meant by hormone. So this one is what I meant about having an exam question asking you to define a hormone. So if you guys memorized that answer scheme, then that'll be pretty good. Not answer scheme, sorry, but memorizing the definition that we have recapped for today. So let's write this down. So this has about 4 marks. I'm going to tell you guys where the marks can be found. I'm just going to write down the answer for you now. Remember that a hormone is so let's start with that. So it's a chemical substance. Sorry, that's destroyed. I'm just going to erase that and draw a better R. DSTROYED. Alright, so where can I find the 4 marks? So actually in this whole definition, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there are 6 points. So if you can mention all of this, you gain a full 4 marks. So where can you gain the mark? Firstly, stating that it's a, oops, can I do that? Can I highlight? Oh no, I can't highlight. Can I not highlight? Oh yes, I can. Okay, chemical substance is your first mark, and then saying that it is produced by a gland is a second mark, and then saying the blood is your third mark, and then target organs, so mentioning that target organs are there, and actually altering the activity part is also a mark there. And then lastly, being destroyed in the liver. So this is where you can gain your or get your 4 points, but obviously there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points here that you can mention. I would definitely prefer if you just mention the whole thing. It's much more safer. Okay, now let's look into our second question. It says here to give an example. So example means you have to name it. Name that hormone and describe how it is involved in maintaining a constant condition. And whenever you see this maintenance of constant whatever, it is usually to do with homeostasis. So within the human body, remember homeostasis is the maintenance of a constant internal environment. Okay, so when it talks about give an example, that means that you have to talk about at least, I think, mainly one hormone that is involved in homeostasis. So from our lesson today, the main hormone that we were looking at was insulin. So we can actually mention about related to homeostasis as well. So I'm going to start in this line right here because it's a bit full right there. So when we're mentioning homeostasis, we always have to talk about the deviation from a set point. So something is higher or lower than normal, so you have to start from there. So in the case of insulin, remember insulin would decrease the blood glucose. That means that insulin is only released when blood glucose is high. So let's start off with talking about that first. Okay, so there I have talked about the fact that glucose level is above the normal. So what happens now? So I want to be a little bit extra, and I want to include about the brain here, or part of the brain. So there's part of the brain that detects this, and that's the hypothalamus. That's an S. I think islets can be a small letter, so I-S-L-E-T, islets of, and then Langerhans is the capital. Okay, so here I talked about the fact that the hypothalamus will detect that change. Because during homeostasis, we do mention about the change being detected as well. And I mentioned a little bit on sending nerve impulses to the islets of Langerhans. That means that they send a message to the islets of Langerhans to produce and release insulin into the blood. Now we have to talk about the target organ. So here I mentioned the change that happened. So the effect that insulin has on the target organ is to promote the glucose uptake. That means taking in glucose, making the cells more permeable to glucose, and promote the storage of glucose by converting glucose into glycogen. Now that we're done with that, we have to mention that the level of glucose now is back to normal, because we're talking about homeostasis here, reaching that normal level. And I'm just going to finish off by saying that homeostasis is achieved. So the main points here is that you need to make sure to mention, so I'm not going to use a highlight, I'm going to use a blue color instead. So you do need to mention about the deviation from this set point. So increasing above normal is 1 point. And then saying the name of that hormone. So insulin is 1 point. And then you have to also name the target organ, so that's 1 point. So not just saying the target organs, but you have to mention liver and muscles. That will finish off and give you that 1 point. And then mentioning what are the changes that happen, so promoting storage of glucose, and this one would give you 1 point. So now we already gathered 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Then returning back to normal is your 6 point, and mentioning homeostasis is also 1 point. So that is how you can get your full marks for this question. I hope that this helps you guys understand how to apply your knowledge into an exam question. And if you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to contact me. And I hope you guys stay healthy, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!